Hello everyone and welcome back to the FIDE Online Nations Cup with another game between Leinier Dominguez and Levon Aronian. Not another game between them, it's the first game between the two of them we're showing. But it is another game from the Nations Cup and another one by Levon, as we haven't seen his games for quite some time. So it's really interesting, really an exciting opening featuring a line I haven't seen before, and it's not a new line, but it's only been used once, and it's obviously been perfected since the last time it was used. So I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. Let's check it out. Dominguez with the white pieces opens with e4. We have e5, we have knight to f3 and knight to f6. Levon goes for the Petrov defense, and the immediate, of course, knight captures on e5. We have d6, pushing back the knight, knight f3, and now knight captures on e4. So the classical variation of the Petrov. We have d4 and d5 now. We have bishop to d3 and bishop to d6, going for the Marshall variation of the Petrov, and Dominguez castles. We have castles by Levon and c4 now. So all very standard stuff. We have c6. And the queen to c2, putting more pressure on the knight here. And now instead of trying to defend the knight, you just allow white to capture it, since you kind of want white to give up the bishop pair, and the light square bishop is very strong. And the main move here is knight to a6. You go knight a6, you threaten knight b4 to go after the queen and bishop, and after white prevents that, then you later shift the knight maybe to c7, to e6, and so on. But here, Levon goes for h6. It's a much rarer move. Still not a new one, but okay. We have rook to e1, not going for the capture right away. You could capture it, and then after, let's say, queen captures, the rook goes here, queen d3 and bishop g4. Black will be very happy with the extra development for the price of one pawn and still having the bishop pair. So instead, rook to e1, now putting more pressure on the e4 knight, and now bishop to e6, putting pressure on the c4 pawn. Here we have a trade, captures, and only now bishop captures on e4. So grabbing the pawn, but giving up the bishop pair. We have d captures and queen captures, followed by bishop to d5. Now, seemingly giving up a bishop, of course, white can never capture it because of captures with check, and you lose the queen. So Dominguez goes to g4 with the queen, and now it's very interesting. Black has a very strong bishop pair. You just sacrifice the pawn. It seems like you want to keep on developing, but here queen d7. Levon just offers up a queen trade, being down a pawn. Which is what makes this game very, very interesting. So we have queen captures, knight captures, and now, knight captures on d7. The interface is not agreeing with me. And here, Levon's next move is bishop captures on f3. So he's down a pawn, and he's now going to give up his bishop pair to create 4 pawn islands in white's camp. And if you try to do something like knight e5 to not allow bishop captures here, then we get something like captures, rook f8 as the rook is undefended, and after bishop to f4, adding another defender here, let's say bishop c5, knight c3 goes after the bishop here, and rook ad1. So this is one way for white to continue the game. However, Dominguez decides that it's not necessary to prevent this. He instead goes knight to c3. He allows this doubling of pawns in exchange for black giving up the bishop pair. So we have bishop captures on f3, g captures, and this position has been reached before, even though it's already move 17, but it's been played this year in the Aeroflot Open between Nodirbek Abdusatorov and Raunak Sadvani, where white was able to win that game after going rook f to d8. But here we have bishop to b4, and it's a new move from Levon, so it is already as of move 17 that we have a completely new game. So okay, we have bishop to d2, Dominguez continues developing, and now rook f to d8. And now the point is that white is still up a pawn, black no longer has the bishop pair. However, black has 2 pawn islands and white has 4 pawn islands, which the 2 rooks Levon has will use to try and gobble up those pawns and create threats against them. So the rooks will now try to double up on the d file, go after this pawn, and so on. So it is very interesting how Levon employs such tactic. We have knight to e4 now, trading off the bishops as well. We have bishop captures, knight captures, and now knight to f6. We have knight to b3, defending the d4 pawn, and now b6, taking away the d squares from the white knight. We have rook 8 to c1, and now knight to d5. We have a3, taking away the b4 square from the knight, but the knight wants to come to f4 because white has no e pawn or g pawn to kick it away, so the f4 square seems like a perfect outpost for the knight. So rook to d6, preparing to double up on the d file, going after the d4 pawn, and rook to e4 now, already adding a defender, also taking away the f4 square from black's knight. We have rook 8 to d8 and now king to f1, starting to improve the position of the king. We have a5 by Levon, expanding on the queen side, and now a4, not allowing a further expansion on the queen side. So g5 by Levon, and now rook to c4, adding yet another defender to the d4 pawn, and now the knight can move, and also this rook can move. So king g7, Levon starts improving the position of the king, and now rook back to e1. We have king to g6, and now knight to d2. For the moment, leaving the d4 pawn undefended, but as long as this knight is here, it's not a problem. So Levon goes for knight to b4. Now that you've played a4, the b4 square is available to the knight, and the pawn is once again under attack. So knight b3, defending it, and now knight to d3, attacking the pawn and the rook on e1. So rook e2, defending everything, and now only now knight to f4, and now the knight comes to f4 with tempo. So you again have to move the rook, and now rook to f6. Now Levon will shift his attention to the f3 pawn and f2 pawn, as the pawns are doubled here. So knight back to d2, adding a defender to the f3 pawn, and now knight to d3, now attacking the rook and the b2 pawn. So you have to play rook to b1, which Dominguez does, and now rook to f4, now adding another attacker to the d4 pawn. Problem is, you've now left your b6 pawn undefended, so Dominguez immediately goes after it. Rook c6 check, king g7, and now rook captures on b6. But now Levon is also free to gobble up some of the pawns. So rook d captures on d4, putting pressure now on the a4 pawn as well. So b3, defending it, and now comes a move that obviously Levon played, going into all of this. Knight captures on f2, and it makes sense. You open up a discovery here, which means you've just grabbed back the pawn. So if you go after this, then just captures here, and after the king moves somewhere, let's say here, you just grab this pawn as well, and now this pawn will fall, otherwise you're not going to be able to push anything on the queen side, and with the 3 connected pass pawns on the king side, black will be winning this position. So instead, king to e2 was played by Dominguez, and now rook to h4, just going after that h2 pawn. We have knight to f1 defending, and now knight to d3. Improving the position of the knight. We have rook to b5 now, putting pressure on the a5 pawn, and now knight to f4 with check, pushing the king back, king f2, and then now comes rook to d3. Here Levon is planning rook c3 to c2, which will put a lot of pressure on the white king. So here you should go rook captures on a5. It seems like a bold move, but you should do it. And after rook c3, then you go b4. You start pushing the pawns, and black will have to go after the pawn. You will not be able to start attacking the white king with something like knight d3, checking g1 and captures here. But this will also give you time to start pushing your a pawn. So this is definitely the way to go for white. However, Dominguez played rook to e5 instead, which really took me some time to figure out what he was trying to do. Maybe go after rook to e3 to try and trade off the rooks. The problem is, after Levon's rook to c3, he only then captured on a5. So basically, he wasted a move with rook to e5 and only then capturing here. So rook to h3, and now comes rook to b5. Preparing, of course, to push the a pawn, and now rook captures on f3, grabbing the pawn with check. So rook h captures on f3. Sorry about that. Just give me a second. Sorry about that. It was the mailman. So rook h captures on f3 with check, and now king to g1. So already Dominguez king is not feeling all that great with the 2 rooks and knight in front of it. We have rook to c2 now by Levon, preparing to put the other rook to f2 and put a lot of pressure here. And now rook to b6, probably preventing the king from going into the game. But Levon needs no king. He goes for rook f to f2. Now there are definitely some threats here, and Dominguez starts pushing his pawn, as there is not much you can do here. So Levon played rook to g2 check, king h1, and okay, luckily the h2 pawn is protected. But feel free to pause the video here and finish this game with the absolute best move for black while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting the unstoppable mate in 4. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's knight to h3. And now there is no defense against rook to g1 mate. Well, if you want to move the knight so that the rook guards the g1 square, it doesn't really help you, since if you move the knight, then this is mate, as the knight covers the g1 square. So you haven't really accomplished much. And yeah, again, I have to mention this. I say a mate in 4 because with best defense it's mate in 4, but otherwise in reality it's actually just game over after knight to h3, because here it's mate in 4 because white can play silly moves, and that's why it's you're supposed to say it's a mate in 4, when in fact it's really just game over. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that as well. And here are the standings after 4 rounds. So here is round 3. There you have it. USA against rest of the world won. All the games on the first 3 boards were drawn, and the decisive game was Irina Krush versus Dinara Saduakasova. With Irina Krush winning and USA winning the match against rest of the world. Then we have India and Europe. Europe won 2.5 to 1.5, with the winner being Levon versus Vidit. We've seen that game already. And China versus Russia, we have a tie. Dinglerian defeated Yan Nepomniachtchi, and Vladislav Artemiev defeated Wei Yi, with all the other games drawn. And this are the pairings from round 4. Russia defeated rest of the world. Yan Nepomniachtchi defeated Timur Rajabov, and Sergei Karakin defeated Jorge Cori. Then Europe defeated USA with 3 to 1. Levon, again, it's the game we've just seen, defeated Leinier Dominguez, and Nana Zagnitsa defeated Anna Zatonsky. And we have China and India. China defeated India with Wang Hao defeating Vidit Gujarati, who loses his 3rd game in a row. So tough break for Vidit and tough break for India, as in the final standings, this is what it means. China is leading the FIDE Chess.com Nations Cup with 7 points, followed by USA and Europe with 5, Russia with 4, rest of the world 2, and India with 1 point so far. So we'll see what happens and who will reach the super final. So yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Benjamin Robertson, Darcy Howe, Roger Alexanderson, Alida Tan, and Jean-Francois Bond for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the FIDE Nations Cup and whatever else I manage the time for. And also, sorry about sending you the invitation to the tournament. I really thought it was Friday, and it's only Thursday, so we're going to do the tournament tomorrow. So thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.